Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting episode of OCDTV. I am really excited tonight. We are doing an episode dedicated to Mecha, Kaiju, and Sentai, the three the troika of Japanese science fiction. Doing this to coincide, of course, with the release of Pacific Rim, which I am so excited for. I am about to fire nipple missiles. To my right, Keith. You all know him, you love him. He still won't take off his hat, Martin. And to my left,
hat makes the man.
For the ladies, a man whom Taylor Swift has dedicated over half her next album, Joe the Rooster, Grand Roos.
Steve, we are never ever getting back together.
The blame is on me. I knew you were trouble when you walked in. All right, so starting, I guess we'll go with the oldest pedigree of these three great and wonderful subjects of which I'm having trouble improvising about. Keith, let's talk about Kaiju.
Okay. Well, obviously the granddaddy of all the Kaiju, of course, Godzilla. Created in 1954, kind of as a metaphor for atomic destruction by obviously the Japanese who had been bombed in World War II, knew quite well the effects, and so they wanted to, it was like a horror movie really, obviously evolved into something a lot different particularly in the 60s, but it was...
Yeah, even viewing it now, you wouldn't look at it as a horror film.
No, not really.
But I bet in those days it did seem pretty scary. I mean, it was pretty good special effects for the day.
Yeah, for 1954, certainly. I mean, and just the idea that this awesome kind of weapon almost that we as people created came back to haunt us. Of course, back and then later on in the series, like in the 60s and stuff, Godzilla kind of evolves into more of a hero.
Right. He would sort of tread the line, and then at times, but he eventually became like Godzilla. Sort of, it was his turf to trash Tokyo.
Right.
And other monsters really weren't allowed. And that was really it. Like when if they showed up, he would get in the way.
Yeah, like in Godzilla Raids Again, it's the first appearance of Anguirus, but it's still kind of
the one where they talked.
No. This was a black and white. This was 1956. Okay. The one where Anguirus talks with Godzilla, that's Godzilla versus Megalon, I think.
Right.
Where they have a little just going, you better go find out what's going on.
What was that? I mean, were they using, what was that? Were they actually talking? Were they using telepathy? What was it going on?
Well, I think they were just speaking monster.
Okay, I guess so. Maybe that was the translation for the audience.
Yeah, well, that's exactly
what it was. Maybe it was monster sign language, and that's what.
So, we're on the subject, so I don't know about Joe, but what is your favorite installment in the Godzilla mythos and series?
I have never seen any of them.
Oh,
what?
Well, we have to
I
rectify
may have
that.
seen bits and pieces of the Matthew Broderick movie that I'm pretty sure you're not talking about.
No, I'm not talking about that at all.
In Kaiju fandom, that's referred to as Gino, or Godzilla in name only.
Okay, yeah, that's
funny scene in there's two actually references to him in you have in Godzilla Final Wars, he gets his butt handed to him in like 2 seconds when the real Godzilla shows up and just cooks him. Yeah. And then also in Godzilla against Mecha Godzilla, they're like all the people in the briefing room, and they're talking about a Godzilla appearance, and then two guys like leaning to each other. They think Godzilla appeared in New York like a year ago, but we're pretty sure that wasn't him.
which again, and that I gotta be honest, that may or may not have been in the original Japanese translation.
Yeah, that could have been that added in for.
That movie was so terrible. Not Roland Emmerich's best.
Yeah.
No.
I'm not sure if it was his fault entirely.
That's again, and again, why didn't he have Godzilla step on the White House in that? I mean, that
because it was in New York.
I guess, but you seemed like maybe he could have. I don't know. Just seems like he dropped the ball on that for all the times he's blown it up.
Why didn't Godzilla breathe radioactive fire?
I don't know.
Why was he an iguana? Why? Why?
Again, I could have accepted an iguana if it still looked like this. Like a CGI this.
Well, yes.
I would be actually.
Well,
no,
that's why
no,
Godzilla
really?
2000 was a better movie.
But again, still a sweaty guy in a suit. I mean, it
Well, that's
wasn't.
the point.
You know, they talk about that. The guys who work in these suits, they recruit them from like steel welding plants and stuff like that. Guys who are used to wearing heavy protective clothing in really hot environments, and that's how, you know, they tend to get jobs working on Godzilla films in these suits. And that, I think, was something that worked for Kaiju, I think, in the 90s when you know, they rebooted the series with
Right.
Godzilla in 1985, and then Godzilla versus
Biollante.
Biollante in 89, you know, they used CGI, well, not in those two, but, well, a little bit. But that series throughout the 90s, it was in conjunction with the models and the suits, which I think, I don't know, there's just something endearing about it.
Yeah, I think the ones from the 90s were pretty decent as far as the Godzilla movies go. My favorite's not among them, though. My favorite, I think, is probably either Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, or which is also called Godzilla vs. Astro Monster, or Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Those probably, if you're taking out like Destroy All Monsters.
I mean, I'm not taking out Destroy All Monsters.
Well, that would
because
be the favorite immediately.
Because in a series known for corny dialogue, that has
That's
some
the
of the
best.
corniest. It's so quotable.
Everybody,
and they just have fun with it. And I think, I mean, even the guys who did the translation for Godzilla 2000 even said, yeah, we were just playing around.
Yeah, they had a great time with it.
They threw some goofy stuff in it. And I think, I mean, I don't know how cheesy they come off to a Japanese audience in Japanese with the original Japanese dialogue. Like, I don't know how corny it is.
Right.
But at least to an American audience, I think that's sort of linked.
Right.
To
Well,
the
yeah,
enjoyment of the film.
yeah. It's the more corny the dialogue, pretty much the better the movie.
And I think, yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think it just sort of, but there's a transition too, because when you're a kid and you're watching that stuff, you're just looking at the monsters and the robots.
Yeah, you're
thinking,
waiting for the
wow,
monster
this
fights.
is really
Yeah.
cool, you know. And I think sort of something like Mecha Godzilla. I mean, that's obviously the newer version. But you know, just this concept of a giant robot with a human piloting it or something like that, or controlling it was something that really sort of evoked, you know, a 5-year-old imagination.
So I really like that Mecha King Ghidorah from Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah from the 90s.
Yeah, that was, which is funny. That one's probably out of the 90s my favorite, just because.
Yeah, that one's
of
really
all
good.
I mean, it is really also just as corny, but they've got like that Terminator guy.
Yes, yes.
Doing the Terminator
M11.
run.
M11.
I mean, it was like they weren't even hiding it, you know. And but it's endearing, you know. It's tongue in cheek.
So which one? You never said which one was your favorite?
Oh, it's Destroy All Monsters.
Destroy All
I
Monsters.
mean, it's just there's not, you know.
You should let him see Godzilla Final Wars. That's a good one.
Well, that's you know, actually, it's a funny you bring that up because they have a squadron of Power Ranger-like guys.
Yes, the
in that one.
yeah, the mutants.
The mutants and that sort of operate. Did they call it Mecha Godzilla in that one? Was it?
No, it's the Mogira.
Mogira, yeah. They you know, sort of almost like a melding of that. Obviously, it wasn't the.
Well, because it was more like a ship.
Yeah, but it wasn't. Yeah, I don't know how to. I don't remember it well enough to say it was. The intent was to make it like a Sentai, but it really wasn't.
Not really. It was a ship, really, and it had a big mazer on the front.
Right.
It shot mazes.
It's like a ice weapon.
Oh, okay.
mazer.
That makes way more
Yeah,
sense.
it's just I went scooped up a bunch of rock from Monument Valley, fired them, ruined every John Ford movie forever.
Also, there's a new Godzilla in production.
Yes, that's an American production.
Yeah, Gareth Edwards is doing
Gareth
it.
Edwards, which I haven't heard. Do you know what production design he's going to go with? Has he talked about how he's going to approach the character? Whether it's going to be sort of this goofy bipedal thing or something closer to the
It's going to
equally as goofy T-Rex iguana monster?
I think it's going to be more looking similar to this, you know, upright Godzilla, but I believe he's going to be more animalistic though. And they are going to have two monsters, so he will be fighting another monster.
Okay, all right.
So But again, it's really early in production, so
If he doesn't breathe fire, I'm going to demand my $8 back.
I believe he will be breathing fire.
What if he breathes regular fire instead of radioactive?
I'll allow it.
Okay.
Like a dragon. I mean, he's
Right.
essentially a dragon.
Yeah,
I mean, it's,
essentially.
Sort of a manifestation of fears, I guess. With the original intent was to say, okay, let's take a really ancient monster that anybody can identify with, a dragon, and turn it into some sort of modern monster to fight against, or to pose a threat to humanity.
Well, they also had a cool origin story in Giant Monsters All Out Attack, which is Godzilla was actually the manifestation of all the souls who had died in World War II.
Oh, right. Yeah, I saw that.
And they were all angry.
Right. But
I liked how you said earlier he was a representation of their fear of the A-bomb and radiation and nuclear fallout and all that. But later, as he became a hero, that sort of coincided with how they started to realize nuclear energy could be used for more constructive things.
Kind of, and they also villains became more like aliens and things.
I mean, that's only something I'm gleaming from this
I
conversation.
guess,
here.
I mean, those later films were, especially towards the end, were really aimed at a youth market. But yeah, I guess you could look at it that way. But yet at all times he's dangerous.
Right.
I mean, it was never a good thing that Godzilla had showed up because
Right.
he was going to start stepping on things.
And typically, like especially in the '90s movies, where he'd show up and he'd technically the hero, but usually after he chased off the other bad guy monster, he turned around and smashed everything anyway.
Well, then he was less the hero and more just the protagonist.
Right.
The person that the story revolves around, not necessarily.
He's really an angsty anti-hero, I think.
Yeah. I was going to use that as an anti-hero.
Moving on, something that I think may have had similar origins is Mecha, which is sort of my favorite, and I think and this would be giant robots, or even just suit costumes that an individual could wear. But this is something that I think has its origins in Godzilla. And also the modern jet age, with the introduction of characters like Gigantor and Giant Robo, and Gigantor being considered to be the first mecha anime in 1958, which later got translated into for an American audience in 1960. And that sort of led to a popularization of buying these really cheap shows from Japan, dubbing them into English, chopping out most of the violence, and presenting it for an American youth market, which led to a lot of flourishing of intellectual property in the 80s, which of course is where we get Transformers and Robotech and GoBots and of course I got Voltron here, got the Lion Force, which is an excellent example of a show that probably wasn't intended for a youth market. In Japan, because it was extremely violent. That was edited down, and even so, still a little bit harsh. When shown to the American audience. But I bring up Voltron because I like to look at this as sort of the origin of Sentai, a little bit. This idea of five pilots, around five, not always, but a group, a group of pilots with with individual robots that join together either all or in part to form some sort of a mega weapon. And this is Godzilla's being attacked by some sort of giant bug creature.
Mega Gear.
But I think the popularity of this transcended generations. With the introduction of something like Power Rangers, where this concept I think just really strikes a chord with kids. Everybody's got a color, everybody's got a different robot with different functions or weapons, or in case of Power Rangers, it really made it more interesting by everybody having an individual animal. And I think especially for a youth market, that's I don't know, just finds it really appealing, and Transformers was the same way. There was something for everybody.
The Zord's kind of like Predaking.
Yeah, exactly.
Transformers.
Predaking was huge.
He was. He's awesome.
Yeah, Transformers, and I want to do a show on Transformers later on, so I don't really want to get too bogged down.
Yeah, we'll certainly do that.
But I brought Jetfire here with me. This is my Jetfire. There are many others like it, but this one is mine. Because this image you're seeing here is clearly Roy Foker's Veritech from Macross.
Right.
I mean, this is not an original character from Transformers. Of course, none of them are original characters. Hasbro bought up a bunch of individual toy lines and merged them into one series. Sent those characters back to Japan to be reanimated into a new series, which was even more popular in Japan than any of the series that came before it. This guy couldn't make it into the series in this image because Harmony Gold actually owned the rights to the distribution of Robotech in the United States. So we got this cool Transformer, probably the best individual toy in that entire line. And
to that point.
Right. Well, yeah, to that point. And you know, of course, the character in the show looked nothing like it.
No, not at all.
They referred to him the same way, and it's sort of this fun part.
They changed his name even in the show. He's Skyfire.
Well, exactly. I mean, this is one of these things like via the internet. You know, you could find out pretty easy. But as a kid, wondering, you know, why do I have this toy that clearly belongs in this other series?
Right.
But it just sort of speaks to that that rush in the 80s to grab everything they could from Japan because it was cheap and the toys were essentially already made and they were already being made in Taiwan.
Right, exactly.
And that's really what put Hasbro on top of the. So if I have a point to this rant, I guess it would be that this is what made Hasbro.
Right. Yeah, I think the Transformers property and the G.I. Joe property.
And I just think later on, because of course, you know, Macross being the most notoriously ripped off series, even though Macross was a huge ripoff on Gundam, at least the plot anyway.
Yeah.
Should make a mention of Gundam here. Mobile Suit Gundam being the first traditional mecha anime with pilots in what we would consider the 80s style, where the robots had that sort of boxy samurai look. You know, Mobile Suit Gundam was the start, and that's huge in Japan.
Right.
I mean, that's like Star Wars in Japan. But that didn't really catch on in the States. But other shows like Star Blazers and Voltron and Robotech caught on. You know, and so this is sort of a whole lore to it that as, you know, children we were sort of oblivious to. But I think, you know, as sort of a nerdier guy, you know, which is why I think, and again, when you know, BattleTech came out, you know, which is a tactical war game, and they shamelessly stole that imagery.
Oh, they ripped off Robotech Youth.
They pulled all that imagery on there. They were making miniatures they had no right to make. Because again, Harmony Gold owned that. I think it was Harmony Gold, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's why they had to like abandon all of those images.
They eventually had to dump that. But it was sort of funny, you know, as a teenager finding this game and saying, hey, here's these cool guys again that I don't seem to know where they belong. But sort of carried over into that, which was more of my life wasted. I kid. I love my little robots.
Of course.
Now, Joe, you're a resident Sentai expert.
Well, like a lot of kids, I actually grew up on Power Rangers, the Americanized version. Once I got a little older and I discovered, wow, the Japanese did this too, but they did it first and a lot of times better. I really started looking into that. I mean, Power Rangers and Super Sentai, they had this really great, simple concept. A bunch of teenagers or young adults that could transform into spandex and fight cheesy rubber monsters with giant robots. How can you not love that?
Oh, it's pretty awesome.
I mean, now that you put it like that, it kind of sounds like a fetish thing. But
we could go back to talking about your giant robots and fire-breathing lizards.
Whatever floats your boat, man.
Well, yeah, no, well, we could talk about Aphrodite's breast missiles and how the hell that ever made it past the censors in the States. But
Transorsy?
Yeah, that was.
The beauty of boiling the concept down to that, though, is it could be done so many different ways. You could look at two different Sentais, but they'd have completely different characters, robot themes, villain themes. Some are very comedic, some are very dramatic. Some love their puns and jokes, like the series running right now, Kyoryuger. It's a really lighthearted, fun series with a lot of puns and jokes and wackiness, which is my personal preference when it comes to these, because I don't see the point of taking magical spandex and giant robots fighting rubber monsters really seriously.
Right.
You don't say.
A lot of people love the more serious series,
Yeah,
though.
no,
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great example of how malleable the concept is, I guess, for lack of a better word.
I guess there's sort of a growing theme here where some element of tongue-in-cheek humor seems to be part of the appeal of all of this genre.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Or appreciating the older versions that were aimed at a youth market, you know, in an ironic fashion, or just reliving, you know, your youth or something.
Like with the Godzilla stuff, just the, I grew up watching Creature Double Feature on Channel 56, you know?
And something we should point out too is the Sentai. That followed suit with the animes from the 70s and 80s, where they were taking a show originally produced in Japan and re-editing it for an American market.
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually very easy to change. All you do is take the suit and monster and Zord footage, Mecha footage, whatever, and slap some American scenes in between them. Saban had actually been trying to get Power Rangers off the ground for a while. He tried it with a few of the previous Sentais before it. The one immediately before, I believe, was bird-themed, something Sentai Jetman. But 91, 93, something like that, dinosaurs were huge. So
in Jurassic Park,
exactly.
Right? Yeah,
so Zyuranger came out where their mecha were all, 5 of them were dinosaurs, and one of them was basically Mecha Godzilla.
Right.
And I think we've seen how much people like Godzilla.
Yeah.
So Saban, when he had that contract with Twee to bring it over, they really struck gold with that. It was really good timing, I think. Had it been any other Sentai at the time, I don't know that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers would have hit it as big.
Yeah, Power Rangers really was lightning in a bottle. I mean, that's what knocked Ninja Turtles off the pedestal.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, that was really, I mean, it was sort of like it was Transformers, and then Ninja Turtles knocked Transformers off, and then Power Rangers, and
Power Rangers.
it's sort of been sort of a revolving door of popularity ever since then. But
well, it's never been quite as popular as it was when it first started. Some people don't even know the show's still running.
Right. Yeah.
It's actually changed hands away from Saban and then back to Saban since Mighty Morphin.
Yeah.
Well, that was
Disney owned it for a few years, which not many
Well, that was part of Disney's initial attempts to get a hold of an intellectual property that had an appeal to youth male market.
Right.
You know, they had the princess market cornered. You know,
still do.
I mean, Keith's got 3 daughters. Disney logos are all over his house.
Oh yeah,
and that's,
I got Disney everywhere.
But they struggled. I mean, they tried to create new properties, but I think buying Power Rangers was definitely an attempt initially, you know, or essentially a move in the same direction as their recent purchase of Star Wars.
Absolutely.
Incidentally, can we point out Star Wars, the Empire Strikes Back, 1982, the AT-AT and AT-ST Walkers were also sort of proto-mecha.
Yeah, kind of.
For most Gen Xers anyway. You know, that was something that eased us into that concept. I'm sure Lucas drew inspiration probably from those old monster movies.
Oh, I'm sure. You got this big, terrifying thing lumbering at you.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I just think that. My question for you, Joe, would be: what was your favorite out of all these series, and why? And as an adult, would it be worth it for me to go back and watch it?
Honestly, my favorites are going to be some of the more recent ones anyway. It's a personal preference on my part. I can't get into it, no matter how good the writing is. If it's really old and the footage is really obviously fake, I can't get into it as well. So I prefer some of the newer series. There's Hurricaneger with the ninjas. I think my favorite, though, would have to be Gokaiger. It was the 35th anniversary of Super Sentai, so there were a lot of callbacks to the old series. And even the Sentai themselves, they were pirate-themed, which is awesome.
That is kind of
cool. You can't go wrong with pirates.
Pirates are awesome.
They even had an episode dedicated to the Pirates versus Ninjas meme.
Nice.
Where they crossed over with an old ninja-themed Sentai.
That's awesome.
That is pretty awesome.
It was really cool.
That is super awesome.
That's sort of meta programming there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, there was a lot of that in Power Rangers, actually. I mean, I think there was an attempt to say these all exist within the same universe, or certain series did.
Even Power Rangers did have crossover series. There was Forever Red, where the 10 original Red Rangers from the first 10 Power Ranger series teamed up.
See, if I was a '90s kid, I probably would have loved that. That seemed like the sort of thing that I would have lost my mind over.
It was absolutely a lot of fun. I'd watch almost any of those series again in a heartbeat.
Now, despite all of the violence in those shows, you didn't end up kicking your little sister in the face ever, did you? I mean, that was always this.
No, I did, but it was unrelated to the show.
Oh, okay. All right. That was always sort of the fear that.
And I never really understood that. I mean, I like to make fun of Power Rangers and Super Sentai by saying they teach to solve your problems with violence, but they're punching monsters that are trying to blow up the world in the face. If my son, that I don't have, ever met a monster that was trying to blow up the city, I would absolutely encourage him to, run. But if he couldn't run, I'd encourage him to.
Well, I mean, if he had superpowers.
If he had superpowers and lasers, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, that would be acceptable. I mean, if he was capable of fighting off a world-destroying monster.
But the Power Rangers never, in the Super Sentai, they don't fight humans unless the humans are evil Sentai or Rangers.
I think the issue with Power Rangers may have been because it was real kids, and the kids were acting out the karate moves, and similar to the fears with kids watching wrestling.
Right.
I mean, I can understand the inherent logic.
It's not so much that these kids are intentionally being violent. It's they're pretending to be violent and accidentally causing injuries.
And accidentally hurting someone.
I know the Power Rangers had a struggle in Canada for broadcast rights.
Canada, and they were outright banned in, I want to say, New Zealand?
Probably.
Wow.
I don't.
Something like that. I think it was New Zealand. The country outright banned Power Rangers for being too violent.
Wow.
Which I always thought was ridiculous.
That is ridiculous.
I'm also not a parent, so.
No, that's ridiculous.
I mean, I mean, I've seen my kid act out stupid things, but that's sort of.
Kids are going to do stupid things no matter what they're watching, though. Honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen a kid drop a safe on anybody.
Well, give him a safe, see if he tries. I mean, that's really the issue.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was next to a safe and it was teetering on the edge of a cliff, on those same mesa that were being used as weapons earlier, I mean, I'd be tempted to drop it on a coyote. I mean, that would be something that
I have always wanted to taste Roadrunner.
But, exactly. But anyway, I'd like to thank Joe and Keith for joining me tonight. I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah,
in that short amount of time. I think maybe each one of these subjects probably deserves a whole episode unto itself.
I could talk about Godzilla for.
I really do. We definitely could keep going. But
we
anyway,
gotta have a viewing party. We gotta get Joe in on this giant monster.
I'll watch some Godzilla if you watch some Sentai.
I'll watch Sentai, and take out the S and throw an H in there.
Don't go there. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. If you have a suggestion for a topic for us to cover, let us know on our Facebook page, like us on Facebook, OCDTV, and thanks again for watching.